You are listening to X-Wing Radio.
Welcome back, all you Mandalorians, Padawans, and droids alike. I'm David, that's Wesley, and you just tuned in to X-Wing Radio, your bi-weekly podcast from a galaxy far, far away.
Yes, sirree. So, David, this week we are talking about season 5 of the Clone Wars. But before we dive into that more so, do you have any news from a galaxy far, far away? Anything interesting happening currently in Star Wars that you are aware of and would like to tell our viewers about?
Honestly, I will admit I have not heard anything, or kept up with anything Star Wars related over the past 2 weeks. I have been incredibly busy. But,
Well, David, one of us needs to keep up the slack for the other one, and I'm gonna go ahead and tell you it's not gonna be me.
mhm.
So I guess we're both out of luck
to
here.
to to uh to kind of pull away from the galaxy far, far away thing here. To any of you listening, working full time and going to school full time and trying to work on a podcast is a lot.
Yeah. We got our hands full. So we try to do our best to keep this as structured as possible and come as prepared as possible. But like I said, we're gonna be talking about Star Wars the blah, 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 blah. We're gonna be talking about season 5 of the Clone Wars, which means that we've already had prepare for that. So things outside of that, we have things that we'd like to do, but sometimes it doesn't always work out
Mm.
exactly how
Which,
we
in all honesty, I don't know that there is that much going on in
yeah.
Star Wars right now.
I was
Um,
gonna look up real quick and see if I could find anything. No, I don't want to message them. Oh, no wonder I'm messaging people. Okay, that's because that's not how. Okay.
are you messaging?
Uh, no. So I was looking up some of the Star Wars um chat things I follow on Instagram because a lot of times I find out my Star Wars news from there, and I was typing it in and I clicked on one and it took me to a message, like a thing I could have an instant message with them. And I was like, well, that's not right. And it was because I was typing it in underneath my messages, like searching for them, instead of searching it in the search bar. Um,
Oh,
oh, hey, well, here's something. April 22nd, 2025, Andor season 2. This is from
I knew I
Star
knew that
Wars
was
the
coming.
official page. They
Yeah,
have that.
I knew that was coming up. I didn't realize it was that soon. Actually, I
Yeah,
thought it
I
was
didn't realize that
more
either.
towards the summer. But
Yeah, so we are getting, and let's see, on this post, all it says is on April 22nd, 2025, Andor returns to Disney Plus. So that's all this says. Uh, but yeah, so we are going to be getting this season here, season 2 of Andor. Not too long ago, we talked about season 1 of Andor, a couple months ago on the channel. Uh, it was good. It was good. So
mhm.
what do you briefly just to kind of go over some of this? What are you expecting from this season? Like, like I said last time when we were talking about Andor, we know where Andor ends up. So what are things that you expect to see in this? Like anything character wise you expect to see from this? I mean,
I
like
wouldn't be
what do you expect?
I wouldn't be surprised if we see K2SO um
Mm-hmm.
in this season. Um
Mm-hmm.
Really, I expect this to be more of a I guess about the Rebel Alliance kind of forming. Because okay, like I know we get to see, or we have a show literally called Rebels, but that's not really about the Rebel Alliance.
Yeah.
I mean, the Ghost Crew joins the Rebel Alliance, but they're not. It's not about like the formation of the Rebel Alliance. So I feel like that's kind of where Andor season 2 is going to go. That's the direction it's kind of going to head. Um, but other than that, I don't know where plot wise it will go.
Hmm. I do think you're definitely from season one. They definitely were building up kind of the groundworks for the rebellion. I did mention this to Sarah the other day. Semi diving into what we're going to be talking about here in a little bit with Clone Wars. Uh, part of our part of the season was dedicated to a arc that dealt with Saw Gerrera. Saw Gerrera
Mm,
is a character that we know from from Rogue One. Maybe he comes into Rebels once or twice. I know we've seen him at different points later down the road, but Rogue
Rebels
One is
and Bad
definitely
Batch. Yeah,
in Bad Batch. But anyways, we see his character throughout Star Wars. This is a time we get to see him early on, probably the earliest we get to see him.
this is
But
this
he's a
is.
rebel.
Mm,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
this is the first, both canonically and um like released thing with Saw Gerrera.
Yeah. So anyways though, but we have all this here. Uh but I mentioned to Sarah how it's interesting with what we're watching currently with the Clone Wars and then thinking about later down with the Empire and the Rebels, how all in all the Republic versus the Separatist really turned into the Republic turned into the Empire, and the Separatists turned into the Rebellion in a lot of ways. Because the
Mm,
Separatists, while we see them as the bad guys, and at the time they were, but once you take the heads out, which is what Anakin did at the end of Revenge of the Sith, and you take the Sith out of it, because at this point in time, Dooku was dead, and so the only Sith around was Palpatine and Vader, but he was over the Empire. The Separatists were trying to separate themselves from the Republic at the time because they didn't believe with how the Republic was handling issues. Well, the same thing happened. A lot of the Separatists we've seen times in the Clone Wars series. I think of the one episode maybe back in season 2 or 3 where Padme goes and meets one of the representatives of the Separatist Senate. Not everyone in the Separatist is legitimately bad or evil. It's just they don't agree with the
well,
Republic. And
yeah,
so it's
and that
interesting to see how some of
yeah,
that changes in, and we are hopefully going to see a little bit more of that within Andor season 2 because we've seen
yeah,
some of that, but not a whole in
and
depth.
that does get that arc you reference in Clone Wars, like season 2 or 3 or whatever, actually
Hmm.
does come back in this. But in this season of Clone Wars. But another thing too is in Andor season 1, I think Mon Mothma even mentions something about like you know never having thought she would be working with separatists because like
Yeah,
a lot of a lot of the politicians that joined the Rebel Alliance were former separatists.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so moving on from that, another little bit of news that I found isn't really news per se. So we're gonna kind of speculate on this, but this thing says that two new Star Wars animated series are reportedly in development at Lucasfilm for Disney Plus. Now it doesn't say anything about what they could be. I did read one of the comments said that apparently sometime last year a Star Wars What If was announced. So I honestly would love to see one of those. I think that'd be a really cool thing to do in Star Wars. Now, how they go about doing it, that's one way or another. You can figure that out. But I think that'd be kind of cool. Another thing I saw was talking about how after Bad Batch we have Rex and we have you know Wolf and all of them. How do they all end up? where we find them in Rebels.
See,
You know,
'cause
will we
I
will
was
we
half
see some of that stuff? You know,
I
go
was
ahead.
half expecting them in the last season of Bad Batch to dive into that because
Hmm.
they hinted at it with that episode with Wolf.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I don't know where that would take.
yeah.
Um,
Any thoughts on what you would or thoughts on this? Anything you'd like to see from Star Wars in the animated variety? Any thoughts? Anything?
mm, I'm going to say it again, even though we're probably not going to get it, just because we kind of like half got it. But
Hmm.
Tales of the Sith,
Yes. Yes.
not. I'm not talking about exploring like like what Tales of the Empire did. I'm talking about let's go back and see some like Darth Bane. Let's go back and see some like Darth Plagueis. Um,
Yes. And
maybe not some of the super like dark Sith, but like let's go see some of these like ancient Sith and see some of these stories.
see some stories of Revan
Yeah.
when he was a Darth. I mean, even if it's not necessarily him as a Darth, it would be still cool to see him one way or another. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I would love a Star Wars What If. I would love a Tales of the Sith. I would love, uh, if they do it right, I would love them to expand on Bad Batch, which expands off the Clone Wars. Bad Batch is
Have
basically
another
just Clone Wars season 8, but 8, 9, and
ha
10.
have another show that bridges the gap between Bad Batch and um Rebels.
Yeah. But make the most of that time. Like I mean maybe even do it in a way where it's structured very similarly um to how Tales of the Jedi and Tales of the Empire were, right?
Hmm.
Very short seasons, but
And
more or less kind of
a
got
lot of
straight to the point.
time jumps.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I've heard the idea of it doing a Fulcrum show.
Hmm.
Um,
Dave Filoni's on board for that, I'm sure.
but the problem is we've already seen a lot of Ahsoka's stuff between this
Yeah.
point. Um, and I know that like Ahsoka wasn't the only Fulcrum, but it's still that's if you
It's
did a
kind of what
Fulcrum show,
you'd have to
it
have
would be
a
about
lot of her.
Ahsoka. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, David, uh, speaking of Ahsoka, we're going to be talking a good bit about her in this breakdown of season 5 of the Clone Wars, which we can go ahead and jump on into unless you have anything else to add. Um, I did want to make this comment on season 5 of the Clone Wars. I was watching it, and you have this breakdown here. That we glance over while we're looking through these so we know the episode names and different things about it. Uh all these episodes were released end of mid 2012 into 2013.
mhm.
Now, help me remember, was there anything important going on with Star Wars around this time?
Let's see, 2012. I seem to remember something about Lucasfilm getting sold or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's something along the right lines.
Yeah,
Uh I'm actually currently going to look up and see if I can find the exact date.
yeah, that's
In
what I was
20
about to do.
in 2012 is all this thing says right here. I want to find out what the exact date. When? Let me look up when. Uh, nope, nope,
Okay,
nope,
here we go.
nope,
I got
nope.
it.
Oh, you got it. All right.
So, just for reference, Clone Wars season 5 began airing. First episode came out September 21st, 2012.
Mhm.
The acquisition or the Disney acquisition of Lucasfilm took place, or I guess was finalized, because at this point they would have already been in negotiations. They may have
Mhm.
even already agreed on a price, but the actual like public, uh, purchase and stuff took place on October 30th, 2012.
Yeah. So only really, let's see, one, two, three, four, 5 episodes came out before that, before the
Yeah.
public date of it. So David, at this point in time, I remember hearing some show I remember listening to, and Dave Filoni was talking about how during this time they were still planning on making Clone Wars, but they didn't
Mm-hmm.
know at what point Disney might come in there and say, "All right, we're done with this." So there was a lot of uncertainty as far as like what was going to happen with Clone Wars. I say all that to say Dave Filoni, George Lucas had an impact on the Clone Wars, but Ahsoka is Dave Filoni's character. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and in all honesty, we'll get to how this season ends, but this is kind of Dave Filoni's like kind of like a love letter, like a final send off for Ahsoka. I think it's okay. I'm not entirely sure how old she is, so we might need to call in Chris Hansen if she's under 18 at this point in time. But this is his love letter to Ahsoka. So, uh, but
I'll be honest.
anyways,
It took me a second to get the reference, and I'm just like, oh gosh, you
yeah,
went kind of
yeah,
you went there.
yeah. David, I'll be honest. I thought of this joke on Monday. I've been waiting to tell you and just see how long it took you to realize what I said.
Oh my
Because I was
gosh.
planning on breezing right on through it, and thank you for that reaction. Um. Anyways, hopefully everyone else gets a reference. I'm not going to break that down. But anyways, so there's a lot of Ahsoka in this season, and obviously it
Hmm.
ends with Ahsoka. But they had to kind of tie things off in this season to make sure that it
Which
made sense with everything.
that being said, so this season is all arcs, aside from the first
Yes,
episode. Which actually, if on
kind of ties in with the last season.
a lot of the sites that you see, or that have like the arcs of Clone Wars season 5, will include episode 1 in with one of the other arcs, even though they're not continuous.
Hmm.
So really, it is part of the Shadow Collective arc,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that's true too.
it
All right,
just
David. Well,
anyway.
let's
So
with that, let's dive into this.
because it is like directly connected to that, do you want to save the first episode for when we get to that point?
We can do that. We can do that.
Okay. So we'll just go ahead and dive straight into the first arc, and this is actually the one that you were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
where we meet Saw Gerrera for the first time.
Hmm.
Um, and this is kind of wrapping up the whole Lux Bonteri uh stuff that's been going on since season 2 with that when his mom, the senator, uh was assassinated.
Yeah.
Um, so basically, this is the liberation of Onderon.
Hmm.
Um, so Onderon is a separate or is yeah, it's a separatist world, and basically they have a phony king
It's
controlling
a it's a
the
it's a
planet.
world, and at one point, their quote unquote true ruler makes this comment how he didn't want to join the war, but he knew eventually he'd be forced to a side. And it's one of those worlds that did not willingly, at least the higher ups, did not willingly side with the separatists. They were forced in, replaced, and now are under separatist control.
Mm,
So we have a band of rebels who are trying to liberate the planet. Now, the whole entire plot of this arc is the rebels trying to liberate Onderon, but also the Jedi and the Republic are unwilling to actually actively help this band of rebels because they say it's an internal issue.
Mm.
What? The galaxy is at war
Okay,
with the
so
Separatists. The Republic is at war with the Separatists. The Separatists have taken over this planet. David, I feel like either you have an explanation for me or you're going to agree with me. But if you have an explanation, then please explain this to me. On how the Republic doesn't see the Separatists taking over a planet as an issue that they should be addressing. Sure,
so
rebels are fighting, but still fighting against the
I'm
Separatists.
gonna I'm gonna not necessarily I don't necessarily have a um reason as to why, you know, the especially the Jedi Council is, like acting like this, but
Hmm.
we definitely in this season, we've seen it in the past couple seasons, but definitely a lot more in this season. We see the both the hubris and the growing political ideology of the Jedi Council.
Hmm.
They're way
Yeah,
too involved in politics.
yeah. I mean,
Okay,
the whole
the
entire
Jet
arc later on in the series is just how much involved with the war the Jedi have gotten.
mm, the Jedi are supposed to be peacekeepers,
Hmm.
and by their own logic, it shouldn't matter if a planet is part of the Republic or not.
Hmm.
But they've become so wrapped up in the politics that they're only willing to help planets that are part of the Republic.
Yeah. But that being said, like, you think about it. If there's a planet with people on it who are trying to liberate the planet from the separatist control, right? They're,
It
technically,
should be the well, okay, like I get a little more with one of the arcs coming up because it's not the separatists that they're trying to, free the planet from. But
mhm,
in this, yeah, I get your point. Like, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Like, you should.
yeah. But like even in this sense, like I'm pretty sure after the fact, at the end of this arc, Onrut joins the Republic
Mm,
because that's who their leaders or who their true leaders want to side with.
mm,
So if you have the ability to help someone who is going to side with you, why wouldn't you go out of your way to help them? Especially since it wouldn't have taken that much help, being that they ended up succeeding anyways. If you just gave them a little bit of help, there would have been a lot less death, a lot less bloodshed, and would have been over a lot quicker.
yeah,
I,
it's
I
definitely
did a lot of
a.
ranting during these 4 episodes.
Mm, yeah, it's definitely a very the Jedi Council does not and the Senate do not make very good decisions in this season.
You know what's funny is so a lot of people say when it comes to what a Jedi should be, look to Obi-Wan because Obi-Wan is, for all intents and purposes, probably one of the best examples that we get in Star Wars of what a Jedi should be.
Mm,
Obviously, he's imperfect. He's gonna make mistakes. There are times that he's not exactly on point, but it's interesting to see him in this because so Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka go to train the rebels how to fight and advise them during the war, but not actually participate in it. They're treading a very fine line of not actually helping, but kind of helping.
hmm
But anyways, and Ahsoka's all gung ho and like, hey, we need to help them. Why aren't we helping them? Basically what I've been doing for the past couple seconds here. Uh, and Obi-Wan's like, the voice of reason coming in there. Now, you can say he's just kind of, reiterating what the council says or he's brainwashed like the council is. I honestly feel like what you see from him in this series is he trusts and believes in the order. The order is his life. He follows the code, Jedi code. He follows, this is his life, this is what he lives, this is what he believes. But he can, as much as someone in the system and as much as someone who's still going to get fooled by the system, he can see that there's problems. He can see it through Ahsoka later on. He can see just, because of how he feels and is kind of attached to her, he sees the issues with it. You see it in here, you see it in Revenge of the Sith, how he sees it through Anakin, where he's not necessarily disagreeing with Anakin whenever, he feels like the council's doing this or that doesn't seem right. He's like, but this is how we're doing it. He's following the rules, even if maybe sometimes the rules don't quite make complete sense to him.
Mm,
And so it's interesting to kind of see him tread that line of like, no, we have to do it this way because this is tradition. This is the way will the council. We have to, you know, despite the fact that he's like, it may not sound right, but this is what we have to do. You know,
yeah.
and I kind of saw that through him just slightly in this season. Even sometimes like just in the animation, the way that they made him look at in certain ways, it just seemed like they were trying to get that point across where it's like, you know, you're looking at the council and you're like, man, what a bunch of idiots over there. These guys are dumb. And they made Obi-Wan just slightly different. So you're like, oh, well, he's still one of the good ones.
Mm, yeah. So, I don't know. Do you have anything else to say about this arc?
No, I mean it was a good arc to watch, but there's not a whole lot, I guess, necessary to say
So I feel
more
like
about it.
these first three arcs are all kind of like that.
Yeah, I will say so. This second arc is interesting. Mainly for the beginning part of it. So this second arc, you have it titled here, Youngling Jedi or Young Jedi.
Mm,
Um, it's essentially about some not Padawans, some younglings, who go to get their kyber crystals, and that's essentially the gist of the arc. They have some stuff happen to them and makes getting home hard, but that's the gist of it all. Um, it's I would assume this is probably the first instance. Yeah, yeah. This is the first instance of us actually getting to see Ilum. Actually, no.
mm.
We see Ilum in the 2D Clone Wars, don't we? Is that Ilum?
Yes, but again, that's not really canon. But
It's canon to me, David.
mhm.
But
But yeah,
anyways,
yes, this.
so first technical instance of us seeing Ilum. Again, the other instances of us seeing Ilum is um in Jedi Fallen Order.
Mhm.
And then it is supposed to be Starkiller Base, correct?
Yeah, and Force Awakens. So yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if that was confirmed or more speculation, but so yeah. Yeah, we see it as Starkiller Base later on. So this is the sacred place of the Jedi where, you know, their kyber crystals come from. And um it's kind of cool. Like, obviously, Jedi Fallen Order came out later and you know there was already a design for how the temple looked. But it was cool to see it here and be like, hey, I remember playing that in the game, having to open up the big wall and this and that and the other thing and being able to see it was kind of a cool thing here.
Mm. But
I figured I'd stop.
yeah, it is an interesting arc. Not really, again, not really that much happens. I mean, it's interesting for the lore applications, but not
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
too interesting for like story wise. I mean,
Yeah. Well, one thing that I find interesting about all this, probably lore wise more so than anything else, is just how young the kids are and how much pressure and I guess pressure is probably the best word I can think of to put it to, but like how much they put on these kids, you know? I mean, these kids are probably the same age as the kids that we saw in Skeleton Crew not too long ago, a week or two
Mm,
ago, right? You know, these are 10, 11-year-old kids, 12 at the most probably.
mm,
And they are tasked to within a day, a light day, tasked to go into the cave and find their crystal. And within doing that, they might have to face things that they may not walk away from. You know, one of the girls has to climb up a huge ice wall, it's an ice wall, but like walk wall, rock wall. You know, there's no safety net, there's no harness, there's not. If she falls, she probably dies. You know, I mean, obviously, I understand these kids have been taken, at a young age, like probably what 3, 4 years old. They're taken and brought to the temple and trained from that age. So these are not normal kids, but it is interesting to still see how they are still kids. You know, there's still the rivalries and the petty fights and just different things that kids do. You know, they might be Jedi, but they're still kids. And if they made the comment how if they get trapped in there, they're trapped. You know, there's no
mm,
way of getting them out, which obviously is disproved a little bit later on. But uh they're trapped in there. And it's a 17-day cycle before the sun would come up again. So they'd be in there for a long time. They'd probably die of the
mm.
cold or lack of
But I
food or
mean, then
anything.
again, this is also part of the like. This is like one of the Jedi trials,
Well,
you
yeah,
know.
but I'm saying,
But
it's interesting to see this. Like, this is the Jedi,
mm,
like I mean, talking about how old Ahsoka is at the beginning of the episode. She may not be that old. She may be old. At the end of this arc, they tell her she's good enough for knighthood, though. You know, she's been through a lot,
mm,
and she's probably only at most in her early 20s. Like 2021. If that, if that.
I think she's supposed to be in season 7. I think she's supposed to be 17. So
Yeah, I'm just saying, like
she's
at the
probably
very
16 at this point.
latest.
She's probably
I
16
think
at this point.
I think
So
when she joins up with Anakin in the
she's
first in the
14.
movie, I think she's around 13, 14. So yeah, at this point, she's been.
She's probably 16, pushing.
So we need to let Chris Hansen know he's got a new target. Anyways, uh, okay, Sarah watches a lot of reaction videos, and they watch a lot of his, so he's on the mind. But anyways, um, yeah, she's extremely young at this
Mm,
point in time. She's extremely young. I mean, look at what happens at the end of season 7. 17, 18 years old. I mean, she's not even 20 yet. And how much she's been through. This is the life of a Jedi. I mean, you know, I understand. I don't know. The Jedi are a cult, so you can't expect them to really respect it that much. But you know, it's
mm.
just
Well,
it's an interesting thing to see just how different they treat kids to how different like you would actually treat kids in real life.
yeah, yeah. Another thing with this arc too is this is the first time we get to see Huyang,
Yes.
um, which obviously he's a much bigger character in the Ahsoka series, but um, it is interesting getting to see him here. And of course, he's still voiced by David Tennant, which
Yeah.
just
I
makes it
wasn't
so much better. But
I wasn't entirely sure because I thought I remembered him voicing him in the Clone Wars, but I wasn't entirely sure if he had. And then Hu Yang popped out because I knew in this arc he was going to, and so he popped out at the end, either the end of the first episode or the beginning of the second episode. And I heard the voice. I said, "Oh, okay, so yeah, he voiced him in the Clone Wars too." His voice is very distinct. Like David Tennant, I mean, despite I mean, he's a good actor. I mean, he's Scottish. If you've ever heard him have a
But
British accent, and
what's amazing,
then you hear his normal accent,
yeah.
you're like, hold on, what's going on here?
Well, it's
Like
because,
you can,
okay, like
but he's a
in
very
Doctor
distinct
Who,
voice. Hmm.
his voice is like he kind of tones down his accent,
Yeah,
but like this is like his actual speaking voice
yeah.
or close to it. Yeah, he's got a very like his accent is very
I mean,
pronounced.
have you seen him in interviews when he doesn't even care how he sounds? He's just talking normal. I mean, he has an accent,
Yeah.
but he is a good actor. He's a good voice actor, but he still has a very distinct voice. He's kind of it's kind of one of those voices when you know it, it's like Liam Neeson. You're gonna know Liam Neeson's voice. When you hear Morgan Freeman's voice, you're gonna know it's him. James Earl Jones. You know these
Yeah.
voices. He's kind of one of those voices that you probably know it if you hear it. If you know the voice, you'll hear it anywhere.
Mm, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, all in all, like I mean, Hondo comes up a little bit later, which is interesting to see Hondo more as a pirate in this. He's
Mm,
really just out for profit. Like he doesn't care. He knows Ahsoka. He'll kill her anyways because she's in between him and profit. The kyber crystals. And so, it's interesting to see him in this
mm.
outfit. Uh, but he
Everyone's
does still,
favorite pirate.
but he does still have a change of heart at the end and actually does the right thing.
Yeah.
So,
Hondo.
I've been stalling because there's not much more to say about that arc.
And I don't think there's really a whole lot to say about this arc either, but
What happens to Gregor? That's about the only important thing that happens. And the next arc is the D Squad arc. It's funny. It has funny moments.
mm.
Kinda. I mean, it gets a little boring, but it has some funny moments.
So
But
I'll be honest, I didn't have a whole lot of time to watch this season. I did
mhm.
not rewatch these 4 episodes. I skipped
uh,
them,
I
but
I've had him on in the background, and I just left it at that.
yeah, it's not. There's not really a whole lot even to say. Okay, so the premise is basically R2D2 has his own squad of droids, and they have a mission they have to complete. That's the
There's
basic premise of the arc.
Yeah, there's four astromechs, one repair droid, whatever the ones with the single eye,
Yeah.
like the ones in Phantom Menace on Tatooine, one of those, and then there's this really tiny, small general guy who's green and has two eye socket things that swirl up around his head. I don't remember what his name
Mm,
is, but he's a colonel of some kind. But he was selected for this mission because he's tiny, and it's basically just them. They go on this mission to because they're robots, droids. They're not going to be expected, I guess, to be
mm,
infiltrating. They steal some key card that's like an encryption thing the separatists have been using. Then their ship gets hit, yada yada. They get dropped on the planet. Then the important thing happens where they find a clone on this deserted planet, on this one little town. I say it's deserted. It's not really a deserted planet, but they find this little town, and on it is a kind of an important character, and honestly, kind of an important thing that they did in Clone Wars was bringing in commandos.
mm,
This is when we see commandos. This is Gregor, a clone captain or clone commando captain. Uh, but he is in the episode, and he doesn't die at the end of the episode. Obviously, we meet him again in Rebels. I
mm.
don't think that we see him again in the Clone Wars, though. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Maybe at some point in season 6, but that would be it.
Yeah, I don't believe we do, but we can be corrected on that if someone else knows, or we will correct ourselves on that later on. But really, Gregor is the only important part of this. Is the fact that they bring him in. He's a you know cool character. because he's a commando, and it'd be cool to see and learn more about what happened with him, which is why I would love to see more about Rex, Wolf, and how Rex, Wolf, and Gregor all got to uh Lothal, right? Was that on Lothal? No, that's on Tatooine. Where do they find him? Wherever they
I
find
don't
him in
think
Rebels.
I don't remember the name of the planet, but I don't think it was either Tatooine or Lothal.
Okay. It was a deserty-esque
Yeah,
planet.
it
Well,
kind of
anyways,
like a salt flat or something. But anyway,
yeah. Moving on to some more interesting arcs.
so
Um,
now, okay, so I will say the first three arcs in this season are, I mean, they're good, but they're not like,
they have their place, but
yeah,
they're not they're not what you're looking for
they're just
for
there.
Clone Wars.
But these
Yeah.
last two arcs are probably two of the best arcs in the entire series.
hmm Yeah.
Um,
Especially most. I mean, even if you have other arcs that you like, episode to episode, if nothing else, the ramifications of these arcs are
mm.
huge.
So this next arc pulls from like all these different plot lines that have been kind of like running parallel to each other throughout the series. It
Mhm.
kind of brings them all into one and it, like ties them all together. Um,
And with this first
namely,
one, we probably should jump back to the
yeah, the
first
first
episode with
episode,
this too.
but namely the Darth Maul and arcs and the Mandalorian arcs.
hmm
So
This has to do with Death Watch and Maul.
yeah, so the first episode is fairly simple. It's Maul and Savage basically just trying to get again trying to get revenge on Obi-Wan.
This jumps back to episode 1 in the
Yeah.
season, but this episode, while it's a standalone episode, technically ties in with this
It
later arc
the
in
the
episode
ne- the
14.
next episode, the episode 14, which
hmm
is the first episode of the actual arc, picks up right where this one leaves off.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's why I kind of throw them together, even though the first one technically is still a standalone episode.
yeah.
Um, but gosh, they're running together for me. I think this was the one where Hondo was in it, right?
Yeah, so they go with their ship, and their goal is to essentially either scare the pirates or bribe the pirates to come along with them so they can start building their army
Mm,
and stuff. Because yes, Maul wants revenge on Kenobi, but he also wants an empire.
mm,
So he's trying to start building that, and he's going to start with the pirates because he might be able to get them and bribe them and yada yada yada, and use them to control more. Well, Hondo doesn't really like this, uh, but it just so happens that Hondo doesn't end up having to do this on his own. Kenobi and another Jedi Master, I believe, are out looking for them and have pinpointed them to this location, so they have a run in there. The other Jedi Master by the end of this episode does die. I do not remember her name. Do you?
um, I think it was Adi Gallia, but don't actually
I I
remember.
I do find interesting. So Savage ends up killing her. Um, he rams her into a rubble wreckage thing with his horns, and then stabs her with his lightsaber. But I do find it interesting because part of the reason that she ends up getting killed in this instance is because she goes to swipe at uh Savage's feet, like kick him in the leg, and you know if you've seen the Clone War, he's a big dude, so she doesn't end up doing any damage. and that kind of throws her off, and I think he grabs her and throws her, and whatever. But I found it interesting because I was like thinking about it. I was like, would a force augmented kick not do anything? Like, I know she's small, but like, you know, size doesn't necessarily matter, as much when it comes to the force. Yoda's a big uh what's the word I'm looking for? Yoda's a good example of that. But
Hmm.
anyways, she ends up dying in that fight. Kenobi does end up besting both Maul and Savage, singly, showing that he is the goat. But anyways, they limp off to where we pick them up
Hmm.
in this next
So
episode.
in the end of this episode, the first episode, they have to basically eject out in a escape pod because their ship's damaged.
Hmm.
So we pick them up in episode 14 with them in the escape pod, and presumably they've been floating out in space for a while because they're uh on the verge of death. They're
Frozen
presumably
over
they
looks like
yeah. Um, but do you
some.
want to do you want to know who stumbles across this escape pod drifting in space?
Uh, I don't know if I do. I don't know if I do want to know.
Just check it. Take a guess.
Take a guess. Was it the
Hmm.
Mandalorian and Grogu? Had they been floating around for that long?
That's a little bit before their time. Um, even though they
Yeah,
both
kind
technically would have been alive at this point, but um
of. I'm close though.
um well, it actually was a Mandalorian or Mandalorians,
Okay.
but not exactly the Mandalorians you'd want stumbling across you. It
Do
was
I want
Death
any
Watch.
Mandalorians? Do I want any Mandalorians stumbling across me? They kind of seem uh, weird.
Fair enough. But no, it was Death Watch that found Maul and Savage.
Huh. All
And
right.
so,
And how does this end up going?
well, they end up making an alliance
Hmm.
to
How's it? How would they come to an agreement?
well, basically Maul agrees to help essentially Maul agrees to help Pre Vizsla take Mandalore in exchange for allowing him sanctuary on Mandalore, basically.
Interesting. Sounds like a pretty good deal. Um, I'm assuming both have a reasonable amount of honor and are not going to betray the other.
Right, of course not. Um, because see, Maul also wants to build a criminal organization.
Hmm. It starts sounding a little familiar.
Hmm. So, in this first episode, he actually him and Savage kill all the leaders of the Black Sun Syndicate,
Oh.
effectively making them the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Pikes actually willingly join them.
Maybe they want to die. The Pikes are good businessmen.
Hmm. Unfortunately, the Hutts don't.
Hmm. Well, I mean, we know Jabba the Hutt survives and goes on. So how does this all go?
Well, they go to uh Nalhutta to try to convince
Mm-hmm.
the Hutts to join them, but they're ambushed by a bunch of the Hutts bounty hunters.
Oh, like who?
Uh, Imbo is the only one that I actually recognize. But there's
Oh,
several
you didn't
other.
you didn't recognize the other ones.
I
A lot of
wasn't.
the other ones were a lot of the other ones were from the other Clone Wars arc. Um, some of the other bounty hunter arcs. I don't remember their
Yeah.
names, but anyways, well, we know
Imbo is the
Imbo
big one,
survives. We know Imbo survives, so they just go to a stalemate.
pretty much.
Oh, okay. So do the Huts just not join then? How's this end up going?
Well, they end up going to Jabba's palace to try to convince the Hutts, convince
Okay.
Jabba to join them. Um, and again, they end up in a fight, and honestly, kind of the second half of this episode does not really accomplish that much.
Yeah, well, I mean, they end up just getting all the crime organizations working for them because they do end up getting Jabba to relent and join them.
Yeah.
And then once they get all of the crime families together, they send the crime families to start causing problems on Mandalore. And Duchess Satine, who is a pacifist, uh, isn't really doing a whole lot to actually help the problems and the crime that's going on with these crime families. And then Death Watch comes in and saves the day. And because of that, the people want Pre Vizsla to be uh, their leader because he takes action.
Mm.
And so he becomes the leader, but there's a catch. There's a little catch to it. Remember how earlier I was saying that there's no way that him and Maul would betray one another because
Oh,
obviously
obviously
they're
not.
they're upstanding people. Well, it turns out one of them's not so upstanding. He's actually sitting down on the throne and stabbing people in the back while he's at it. He decides that he is going to uphold his end of the bargain. He wants to kill Kenobi too, but he doesn't want Maul to be in charge. So he has Maul and Savage locked up in prison. So that's how this episode ends, and how the next episode begins.
So, what exactly does Maul do to? Because obviously Maul is a very vengeful person. So
Yes, yes.
what does he do when Pre Vizsla betrays him? What's his plan to get back on top?
Well, um, I think it's in the Republic prisons. They have forced dampening binders and stuff like that. Well, they didn't do that to Maul and Savage, so breaking out was actually rather easy, to steal a line from pitch meeting that was barely an inconvenience. But they broke out. They went around to find a new puppet, essentially, because Pre Vizsla wasn't going to be their puppet, so Maul needed a new one because he doesn't want to be the face. He doesn't want to be the face of his power. He wants to be behind the scenes, but still in control. Being the face draws too much attention. So he goes and he finds the old prime minister. We might remember from, I think, a season or two ago, where they found some, maybe it was the Pikes or someone, coming in, and it was poisoning the kids' water.
Mm.
And the prime minister got put in prison. Well, he's still in here, and well, he's a really really loyal person to the highest bidder and whatever gets him in power. So he uh he agrees to help Maul out and be the puppet. And so they all go and trample on their way to the what's it called?
Throne room.
Where the throne room. Yeah. I was literally about to say, the room with the throne,
Mhm.
but I couldn't think of throne room. Anyways, they go to the throne room and he challenges Pre Vizsla to a one-on-one duel.
I mean, that's gonna be pretty hard. I mean, Pre Vizsla's got all these gadgets and stuff, all those Mandalorian weapons.
And Mandalorians are pretty good Jedi killers, so
Yeah.
that probably should translate relatively okay to Sith. But
But then again,
beforehand,
Maul also has the Force. I
that's
bet he
true.
uses
That
that a
is
lot in the
true.
fight.
That's true. Well, hmm, maybe not. I don't remember.
He doesn't
Anyways,
actually. Maul
I
actually.
was thinking through. I was thinking through. I was like, I don't think I remember him
No,
using the
no.
Force a whole
That
lot.
that's the cool thing about this fight is Maul does not use the Force to actually fight. So, and also, so he's using his lightsaber. And at one point,
Hmm.
Pre Vizsla shoots his lightsaber, so it doesn't work anymore. And so
Yeah,
Maul
I
is
do remember
literally
this.
fighting Pre Vizsla, who still has the dark saber, still has all of
Hmm.
his, like Mandalorian like wrist rockets and stuff, and Maul's fighting him hand to hand.
Yeah, Maul like grabs his wrist, disarms him, and they honestly, it was Previs's fault for going hand to hand combat against Maul. That
The
was a
the
bad idea.
the only time Maul actually uses the Force in this during this fight is when he is dragging Pre Vizsla up to the throne and forces the dark saber to him.
Hmm. Which I do want to get to
Because
that in a second. Go ahead.
I was about to say because the way this fight ends is literally with Maul decapitating Pre Vizsla execution style.
He decapit he was decap. How does it put in the office? His head was his head got caput. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, it's when they're talking about like
when
the guy
Ed
that got like slid
when Ed
under a
Truck
18
dies,
wheel. Yeah.
yeah. But how does Michael put it? I don't remember how it goes, and my brain is hurting. But anyways, yeah. So one thing to be intrigued by is the obviously with Pre Vizsla coming in here, we are introduced to the dark saber, and currently now Maul is the rightful owner of the dark saber.
Hmm.
Now I do want to get into some of that later because it is an interesting thought that could be had with all this. Um, so anyway, so yeah, now Maul is the rightful heir to the Mandalorian throne, but some people don't like that in Death Watch, so they decide that they're going to rebel against this new regime that is Maul and his, you know, helpers now with Death Watch. The biggest one of this being what's her name?
Bo-Katan.
Bo-Katan. Sabine Wren was the only one coming to mind. That's later on. Uh, but yeah, Bo-Katan is the only one who her and some of the people they branch out and get
No,
out of
no,
there and
no. Um, I seem to remember something about Bo-Katan being someone important, or at least related to someone important.
no, she's about as unimportant as you can get. I mean, have you seen how her hair looks? She's a redhead.
But at least she doesn't have the temper. Um,
Says who?
that's fair. That's fair.
All right.
But
She turns out to be someone important, I'm sure. But anyways, she goes her and some of the other people and some nephew. What's his name? Porky? What do they call him?
um, I can't remember.
I
But
know it
Duchess
was
Teen's nephew.
yeah, that's Cena's nephew, Porky or whatever. Uh they end up going and rescuing her from prison, but they don't actually end up being able to escape. But she is able to get a message out. And they don't use the right lines because the line should have been, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope." Instead, they said,
Hmm.
"Help me, Obi-Wan." You're. I don't remember what they said. They didn't say it right though. I was like, come on,
No,
what are you doing?
they said the line, but she didn't say Kenobi. It was just, "Help me, Obi-Wan. You're my only hope."
I just remember hearing it and being like, that's not right.
Yeah,
Get it right. Gosh.
it
Anyways,
was yeah, it was a reference, but they didn't actually use the right quote. So
they didn't make the reference right. How did Star
yeah,
Wars not make a Star Wars reference right? Anyways, how did Dave Filoni not make a Star Wars reference right? Anyways, uh, but uh, the council receives this message. Obi-Wan sees it. The council says, "Hey, we can't do anything about this, but if you want to take a personal day, do whatever you want." And so Kenobi goes, takes a personal day, and heads over there. I mean, that's essentially what he does, technically. Um, and he goes to rescue Duchess Satine, and that goes perfectly well, I would assume.
I mean, he's a Jedi. Of course, he's gonna get in and get out, no problem.
Well, he got in no problem. I'm not gonna say he got out no problem because he didn't.
Yes, he ends up in prison, and
Well, he ends
so
up getting captured first.
yeah, um, so there's a kind of an important thing that happens here. So Maul is kind of taking a different approach at getting revenge on Obi-Wan. So instead of going through means of physical pain, he finally found someone that Obi-Wan cares about.
Who's that?
Duchess Satine.
I don't
So
remember if we find
he
out here or if we find out in the last arc with the two of them.
we
But
found that
Obi
out in the
Wan,
last arc with two of them, but yeah.
we found out that Obi Wan would have left the Jedi Order if Satine had asked him.
Mm,
That's how much she means.
yeah. So you know, as one does, Maul kills Satine in front of Obi-Wan.
Yeah, and as she
Also,
dies in his arms, she says, "I always loved you, and I always will,"
mm,
and then died.
also, can we talk about the fact of how Disney absolutely hates Obi-Wan because everyone else who gets stabbed with a lightsaber comes back except for people who Obi-Wan cares about.
Oh, that's hilarious. I'd never thought about it like that. That's honestly a good point. Oh, I'd never that. I have nothing to say to that because that's a great point. They hate Harrison Ford and they hate Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's
Mm,
yeah.
yeah, it just
Uh,
like
I was thinking you were gonna head down the path of let's just talk about how I don't know what the I mean I mentioned earlier how Obi-Wan's the model of a Jedi.
mm,
I mean, and this just proves it. I mean, look at how much he had to go through in his lifetime. I mean, by the time he goes into hiding, he's probably only, I mean, what, maybe late 20s, early 30s, technically, canonically, because I think he dies around 50. There's a
mm,
20-year gap between the two. So he's probably only around 30 when he goes into exile on Tatooine to watch over
yeah,
Luke, right? And up at this point in time, right? Imagine being 30 years old and having this much happen in your life, right? Your father figure died right in front of your eyes. You couldn't do anything about it. Your best friend slash brother turns against you, blames you for everything that happens, and you had to essentially kill them. So you had to do the killing in that process. He didn't end up doing it, but for all intents and purposes, Anakin or Obi-Wan thought
Well,
Anakin was dead.
but also, as we find out in Kenobi, Obi-Wan thought he had killed him.
Yeah, exactly. He thought he was dead. And then you have to watch the love of your life die in front of you again, right? And you have to live through the entire destruction of your religion and the outlaw of you as a entity or person or whatever. Like as a Jedi, you are outlawed. You are no longer allowed to be this. Your whole entire life is crumbled in pieces, and you don't decide to turn to the dark side. You know, Obi-Wan is 100% right when he says only the weak turn to the dark side. Obi-Wan is not weak. He went through so much crap in his life. Like literally no other character has had to deal with that much. You can say Anakin had to deal with his wife dying and had to deal with Ahsoka leaving. Ahsoka leaving, that wouldn't be changed. His wife died because of him. Now, sure, the Force gave him the visions, but if he had acted differently, he wouldn't have. That wouldn't have ended up happening.
Mm,
At least not in that way. His mom died. Yes, you can say that too. But like the amount of things that Obi-Wan had to go through, and he stayed true to the Jedi and to the light side of the Force. I mean, you know, he was heartbroken here, but a couple minutes later, he was cracking jokes again. He moved on. He's good. He found out there was a sister, so you can just move on real quick.
I don't think that's
Um,
very good advice.
no, it's awful advice, unless it works out. Unless it works out, so we're not a dating advice show. We're a Star Wars podcast. Uh, but yeah, the gist of this whole entire arc is the taking of Mandalore. By the end of this
Mm,
arc, um, Maul is in control of Mandalore. Well, mostly. There's something that happens at the end. Actually, something really cool that happens at the end.
oh, and what's that?
Um, I don't know. All right, so moving on to this next. Okay,
Oh
this
gosh.
this okay. So the way that this episode ends until season 7, this is probably the best duel we've see in the Clone Wars. A
Mm,
duel between Darth Sidious, Maul, and Savage Opress. This is Darth Sidious unleashed. This is
mm,
what we get to see. Which honestly, watching this, I kind of wish in Revenge of the Sith they had Palpatine dual wield.
mm.
I think that would have been cool. I know it would have been a lot more choreography, a lot more to it, but I feel like it would have been a really cool fight if they ended up letting him do that.
Now,
um,
honestly, if like the way Palpatine was fighting this, you could have had honestly, you could have had Yoda and Obi-Wan there in that fight and had Palpatine still win,
yeah, I
or at
mean,
least still be a stalemate.
yeah, I'll say this: it was fun to see just how in control he was the whole
Mm.
time.
Oh, 'cause that's another thing too. So, obviously, Savage was not that powerful. I mean,
Yeah,
he was strong. He was a brute, but not.
yeah,
He wasn't really
that
that
was about
that
it.
powerful, that skilled. Maul was. I
Yeah,
mean, obviously, he's killed several Jedi.
let's make this point. Talking about it earlier, I was going to make this point. I forgot it. When him and Pre Vizsla fought, right? Maul was trained from birth by Darth Sidious.
Mm,
I'm not entirely sure if that's canonically, but he's been trained from a young age. So imagine you have the Jedi way of being trained. Imagine a Sith twist on that. Okay, it's going to be harsher. It's going to be rougher. I mean, Maul was essentially trained like, Roman, or not Romans, like the Greece, children were,
Spartans.
like the
Yeah.
Spartans. That's what I was looking for. Trained from birth to be calloused warriors, taking life without a thought to it. Only the strong survive. Maul was one of the strong. So, you know, no matter what fighting style you're going to get into, he's going to probably come out on top. So that just speaks to just how powerful Sidious is. And Sidious tested lightsabers. I think we've talked about this before. Sidious saw the lightsaber as a lesser weapon. You know, it's
The
extremely
only I was gonna say the
good.
only reason Sidious had lightsabers was to mock the Jedi.
Yeah. I mean, he saw it as a Jedi weapon and yeah, used them to mock the Jedi. But that being said, he was still a master of all seven forms. Yeah. Um, because I mean, that's just how good he was with this. Um, it's extremely annoying in I think it's in both of the new Battlefronts. Sidious only shoots lightning. He doesn't have a lightsaber. And
Mm.
it's like, all right, you might be accurate to the lore, and he might, rather use his lightning, but this is not working out very well. It's hard to use Sidious in any of the Battlefront games, unless it's the older ones, because he actually had a lightsaber in the older ones.
But even in
Uh,
the older ones, he's still not really a good
no,
character to
he's
play
not.
as. But
Not really. But this is a cool fight, and probably the best we get to see Palpatine at.
yeah.
Uh, so question. Obviously, at the end of this fight, Sidious wins. Savage Press is killed, but Sidious wins. Maul, however, is not killed. So, help me with this. Is Darth Sidious the rightful owner of the Darksaber? Because Maul is still alive, but he was beaten in combat. So does life or death matter in this, or is it just beaten in combat?
Well, I think there's also an aspect of having to claim the Darksaber.
Okay, you can say that. So that means that, well, then who would be the rightful heir of the Darksaber when Kenobi kills Maul? Because technically, Maul should still be the rightful heir to the Darksaber. Being that at this point in time, by the time Maul dies, the only two people who would have beaten him in combat would have been Sidious. I guess technically, well, clone troopers. And then uh,
Well, okay. So if we go
Obi-Wan.
based off of this, would that mean that Luke Skywalker is technically the rightful owner of the
Yeah, have
Darksaber?
have you seen that video talking about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the video basically goes where Sidious beats Maul here. So that means that technically at this point, Sidious is the rightful heir to the Darksaber. And then uh Anakin Vader uh kills the Emperor in episode 6. Then he dies, and the Darksaber is a heirloom that gets passed down generation to generation, uh as a means of it being passed down as opposed to combat. And so that means that Luke would become the possessor of the Darksaber at that point in time. So you could look at it that way, or well, let me ask you this. Let's say it is a thing of just whoever kills him in combat. Only one at this point that kills him in combat is Kenobi. Who would be the successor to Kenobi? Would we still put it on Luke because Jedi to Jedi?
Well, even if you went that way, Vader killed Kenobi.
That's true. Hey, so either way, Luke is the rightful heir owner of the Darksaber, not Bo-Katan. I remembered her name
Not
this time.
not Bo-Katan or Din Djarin.
Yeah. So yeah, it's had a convoluted history, but huh. I don't know. The dark saber is a really cool thing. It was cool when we got to see it in Mandalorian, but it has a very interesting history. It would be
Hmm.
interesting if they were to dive into that a little bit more too. You know, I mean, with the Mandalorian, why not dive into some of the ancient history of the Mandalorians? With a show,
Hmm.
could be a cool idea. Well,
So
anyways,
okay.
hmm?
So on a side note,
Hmm.
I almost wish that it wasn't Tales of the Jedi and Tales of the Empire. I kind of wish it was just Tales of the Light Side and Tales of the Dark Side,
Hmm.
so that we could get like, uh, you know, basically like, Tales of Mandalore or something.
Yeah.
Which I
Well,
guess
who knows?
technically you could. I guess technically you could do that, um, in Tales of the Jedi because what's his name? Um,
Mandalore the
was it Mandalore the Great?
Great?
Was
I
it
don't
Jedi?
remember. I think
So
it was the
technically,
first one,
yeah.
or not the first one. Never mind. It was anyways. You know what I'm talking about.
It
We
was
all
it
know
was
what we're talking about.
the Mandalorian who was a Jedi.
Yeah, who
So I
made the
guess
dark saber?
yeah. So I guess technically you could say, or you could put that under Tales of the Jedi, but
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't know.
I also think it's along the lines of. I feel like Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire, they make it Tales of the Sith, are while they're different things, I feel like they're just all subcategories of, the Tales of series.
Yeah,
So they could make Tales of Mandalore, I guess.
yeah.
Something along those lines, and that'd be really cool if they did that. Uh, so I think that's about it for that arc there. So let's dive into this last arc. I did find it interesting. Uh, all the arcs in this season, except for the Mandalorian arc, are 4 episodes long, which
Mm,
is something that we haven't really seen a whole lot from the arcs in these
yeah,
series.
yeah.
But anyways, so this is Ahsoka. This is the end for Ahsoka. This arc right here, Rogue Jedi. Um, I'm really glad that I watched this one. I actually this is probably the best watch that I've had for one of our talks about one of these Clone Wars seasons. I think I
Mm,
really watched through the first one, and then I've been kind of stumbling through the past couple ones, not maybe watching all of them. This one I actually did end up watching
yeah.
all through the season
I will
this week,
say,
but I was really glad that I watched this arc because I've had forgotten a lot about it.
mm, I will say, I I think these two arcs right here, again, we have some really good arcs to come in the next two seasons, but these two arcs right here, of what we have already talked about, are probably my favorite two in the entire series.
Mhm. They were definitely fun to watch.
Yeah. Again, we have a really good arc in season 6 and a really good arc in season 7 that are at least tied with these two.
Say
Um,
this, I think for this, the first 2 episodes, because there are a lot of investigation work, aren't necessarily the most intriguing. Like they're still interesting to watch,
mm,
but like coming off of the Mandalorian arc, you're kind of like, oh, okay, I was trying to figure things out. Okay, yada yada yada, and you can kind of. It's not like a full blown mystery where you're really all that confused throughout much of this. You kind of see it coming. Um, but the last 2 episodes in this arc are definitely really, really good.
mm.
Like top tier,
So
some of
basically,
the
the
some of the
the
best.
premise of the entire arc is there was a bombing at the Jedi Temple, and Ahsoka gets framed for it,
Yeah.
and no one aside from Anakin and I guess Obi-Wan
Mhm. I
really
will
really have her back.
I will say this. So episode 3, I believe, in this arc, episode 19 of season 5. I believe is the episode where either that or the beginning of episode 20, which is the fourth episode in this arc, is when Ahsoka gets um
Expelled from the Jedi Order.
expelled. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Expelled from the Jedi Order. So when they go through all this, um, obviously the council has to agree or has to go through with this and agree and whatever. Yoda makes the comment, Obi-Wan's up with all the council and everything. Yoda makes the comment that it was not unanimous. There were people who did not agree with this. And I believe that that was insane, whether he was alone in this or there were some other ones with him, that Obi-Wan was not for the council expelling Ahsoka from the order.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think Yoda,
It
Mace
very
Windu were.
yeah,
Mundi, I believe he was. I'm not sure about Plo Koon, and I
but
think Obi-Wan definitely was on the side.
it very strongly uh hints at the fact that Obi-Wan was the opposition.
Yeah. Um, the hard thing with Obi-Wan, is going to be the fact that he is dealing with a lot of older Jedi, older masters who have been on the council longer. Not that, he's not valued on the council, not that he's not important, but, I doubt that if they were set in their decisions that he was really going to change their minds. But this is again, like I was saying earlier, you can see in Obi-Wan's face just how he doesn't agree with or like how things are going with the council, but he honors the tradition of it. He honors the rules, essentially. But yeah, I mean, in all this, the biggest thing is that so gets framed, and gets expelled from the Jedi Order. I love how after all this, obviously she ends up getting cleared. Because if she didn't get cleared, they were going to put her to death, which doesn't make much sense. How spoiler warning. Barris Offee ends up being the one behind the bombing and all the stuff. Actually, Ahsoka gets framed for the bombing, but more specifically, she gets framed for killing the person who was kind of behind the bombing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's like the biggest charges. Um, but it's interesting because Barris Offee comes forwards and confesses, right? Where do we see Barris Offee again? Is it just wherever we end up seeing her? It's when she gets inducted into the Inquisitorius, right? She's in Imperial or she's in prison. Tarkin was wanting to sentence Ahsoka to death, but Barris Offee just gets put in prison.
I mean, in all reality, she might have been on death row. I mean, if it's any reality, if it's any parallel to, the real world, someone can get sentenced to death and still sit in prison for 10 years. So,
I guess. I guess. I just feel like with the way that Tarkin was putting it, it didn't seem like they were going to take too long before they were putting Ahsoka to death. So that's why I was, I
or
wanted to
that,
bring that up.
or it could possibly be, Palpatine was kind of, I might have a use for you. Let's save you for now.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there are definitely a lot of possibilities, but I did think about that. I was like, huh. Also, Tarkin is a real pain in these episodes. Like, obviously, Tarkin always is in it, but he's especially a pain in these episodes. It's mostly because of the fact that as annoyed as you get with Ahsoka in the earlier seasons, you actually kind of end up liking her in these last couple seasons, and so when people are opposing her, it's kind of annoying to see that.
Yeah.
But uh, but yeah, by the end of this, Barriss Offee comes forward, confesses to the crimes, because Anakin makes her. Uh, I did find it funny that Barriss Offee thought she'd go toe to toe with Anakin, especially at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
This is literally peak Anakin Skywalker. Well, as peak as Anakin Skywalker will get with the events of Revenge of the Sith. Um, and she hits some good blows, but like it's funny that she thinks she can go toe to toe with him. Um, but anyways, then the council goes to Ahsoka and says, "Hey, we were wrong. Sorry about this." Mace Windu, gotta love Mace Windu in the Clone Wars. Is like, "Hey, we just saw that this was actually the Force, giving you a trial, and now you're ready for knighthood." And it's like, can you not just say, "Hey, we screwed up. We messed
So
up. We let you down. Can you forgive us?" Instead of saying,
so
it
so
was all for the
well,
will of the
one
Force.
thing I don't like in these episodes is that at the very end, Ahsoka makes a comment about something like, if the council didn't trust me, how can I trust myself? Which
Yeah,
no,
that
it
doesn't
should have
make
been.
sense. Yeah.
She should have had the opinion of, if the council's so quick to turn on me, I can't trust the council.
Yeah, yeah. Especially since this all starts to set up the distrust that Anakin has for the Council,
Mm,
you know, because of the way that stuff like this was handled. And yeah, I wasn't big on that line. I heard it, and I was like, that's not the right attitude to have because you know you were not in the wrong this whole entire time. The fact that you did trust in yourself is why you're a free person at this point in time. Um, and and Anakin trusted in you too, and that's why you're a free person. So it's not a matter of her trusting herself. It's like if the council didn't trust me, how can I trust them later? You know.
mm.
So it definitely is that was a poor way of putting it. I did find it interesting. I told Sarah this because I heard this fact a while back. I think it was the same thing I talked about earlier with Dave Filoni talking about how when Disney acquired Star Wars, they weren't sure when they would get taken off the air, but they came in every day, worked like they uh like it was just another day. Um, but apparently the only two people or three people who were in the recording studio or room when the last exchange with Ahsoka leaving was um Matt Lanter and the voice actress for Ahsoka. I should know her name, shouldn't I?
I'm blanking on my name. Hang on. Um, Ashley Eckstein.
Yeah. They were the only two in the room. They recorded an alternate ending, and then as they were all leaving, Dave Filoni called them two back in and said, "Hey, so here's what actually is going to happen." And they recorded this. So everyone outside of them were actually surprised when watching this, which is kind of a cool thing. It's kind of a similar thing to the, you know, uh, no, so and so killed your father, and no,
Yeah.
I am your father, kind of a thing. No, I am
Mm.
your father. I'll get it right. Anyways, but yeah, so Ahsoka's gone after this, and I do like the way that they go about doing it because I think I actually remember when this was all coming out on Cartoon Network and thinking, "Oh, cool, Anakin has a Padawan. Oh, why isn't she in Revenge of the Sith? Wonder how they're gonna deal with that." And then these episodes came out, and you're like, "Oh, okay, so she is still around. She's still alive. They can bring her in whenever they want, but there's a reason why she's not there." You know,
Mm.
it was definitely a good way of sending the character off. And also kind of, like I said, building that distrust that Anakin has in the council. The council turned very quickly on his Padawan. How does he know that the council is going to make the right decision in the future? And he doesn't.
Yeah.
It's really just laying on to the fact of how much the council's lost their way. They're not just keepers anymore. They are generals in a war that they should not be generals in a war a part of.
Yeah. Again, like I said, we see several times in this series. Excuse me, in this series of the fact of like Jedi are supposed to be peacekeepers. It shouldn't matter a planet's political affiliation. If the Jedi can step in and bring an end to any conflict, they should want to do that.
I don't remember if it's part of the Mandalorian arc when Obi-Wan goes to Mandalore, or if it's a part of the arc with the rebels on
Onderon.
Onderon. But there's the line said at one point that the Senate or the Republic wouldn't want the Jedi to get involved. And it's like you're not supposed to be a part of the Republic. You're supposed to be a separate entity
Mm,
that kind of, like you said, the jurisdiction is not necessarily this or that. It's you are peacekeepers. You are aligned with the Republic, but you are not part of the Republic, you know? But at this point in time, they are part of the Republic. They do things for the Republic. They get authorization from the Republic. And, you know, there's a lot of things to it that the Republic is a lot more involved in the Jedi and the Jedi Council than they probably want to admit, and they should be, than the Republic should be. Because, like you said, it's political. It's all political now, and that's just how Palpatine was able to manipulate it. He got them pulled into a war that they should never have been a part of. Now, granted, the Jedi have had gotten away from themselves in the past, hundreds and thousands of years. But Palpatine used that to his advantage to be able to deceive them. I mean, Yoda even makes the comment in the hearing where they expel Ahsoka. He says there is much something about cloudiness around you, as there is around a lot of things. He was just admitting the fact that he can't see clearly in the Force, you know, and that's a problem. Yet they still move forward in a decision that is pretty important.
mm. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I said, I really liked this arc. I think it's a good close to the story of, or to like, Ahsoka's chapter in the Clone Wars, and it also does help to kind of push Anakin more towards where he's at in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah,
Um, again, we got to see several points where Anakin was like losing his temper.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
he straight up yells at Yoda.
yeah. Um,
That's not allowed.
yeah, so I feel like that it did a really good job with that. And yeah, honestly, like a lot of the so I'll just go ahead and say it because I know I basically said it earlier, but um, these two arcs are really good, and the other two arcs I was talking about was, of course, the Mandalore arc in season 7, and then the Fives arc in season 6. Um,
Pretty much like almost all what season 6 is about is
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Season 6 is
and
relatively short.
yeah, but those four arcs are so good because
Hmm.
of the emotional stakes in them.
Yeah, yeah. They definitely hug on the heartstrings a little bit. Uh,
Mm,
they also just the ramifications that you know take place throughout the rest of Star Wars from these events. I mean, the Mandalore arc that you're mentioning in season 7 of Clone Wars, it may not be part of the same arc, but it also, we also get to see what all is going on with. Actually, no, it is part of the same arc. Never mind. We get to see Ahsoka's side of Order 66.
mm-hmm,
Now I'm sure you've seen. I probably have sent you videos of the I think it's Tales of the Jedi where Ahsoka's being trained with the 501st, with the drills or whatever that Anakin has her do. I think it's in Tales of the Jedi. Um,
Mm,
I don't believe I remember seeing it in Clone Wars. Uh, and then it cuts to her evading the clone troopers in during Order 66. Ahsoka, it's not surprising because Ahsoka was trained by Anakin. But I don't think people give Ahsoka enough credit for how good of a Jedi she is. Like how skilled and how powerful she is. She survives essentially two Order 66s, one of which is right here, because she evades the clones. She not only evades the clones, she also does it without killing any of them.
mm-hmm,
She gets captured in the end, but it's because she was in a fight and gets kind of discombobulated and they come up on her on that at that point. They did not best her. The clones did not.
mm-hmm,
And obviously they don't best her during Order 66 either. Ahsoka may have only ever gotten to the rank of Padawan. She was good enough to be a Jedi Knight because they would have accepted her back and brought her into as a Jedi Knight. But Ahsoka, at this young of an age, is I don't know if it's because of how Anakin's trained her. I don't know if it's because she had, been basically thrown into a war at such a young age. But the amount of like skill, I mean, we see it in Tales of the Jedi where she beats an Inquisitor without a lightsaber.
mm-hmm.
You know, that takes skill, that takes, a lot of training and focus and power within the force and all those things. But it was cool to see her just how she was able to escape in such a hostile environment and still be able to come out on top, essentially. Now, one other thing that does come out of this, we've already talked about um this on the channel, and the name is escaping me. But anyways, Ventress shows up in these episodes. Ventress is now a bounty hunter in the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
These episodes would have left Ventress right where we would have picked her up in
Dark
the
Disciple.
Dark Disciple. That's what I was looking for. Dark Disciple arc that should have been a Clone Wars arc, but turned into a book, which we have discussed. Um, but that was actually supposed to be part of, I think, season 6. Ended up
No,
getting
no,
cut.
it was the original season 7. So that kind of going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, with the Disney acquisition. So that was early on in the airing of season 5. Season 6 was already in production at that point.
Mhm.
And then season 7 was already in pre-production.
Well, you would think though that some of because season 6 is only 13 episodes. You would think that
Mm,
some of them would have been branched over into season 6 to make it a longer
maybe,
season.
maybe,
But
but
anyways,
season, but
I guess it was
Dark Disciple was supposed to be one of the original season 7 arcs.
okay.
Of course, the season 6 that we have now, it might have been shorter. I don't know, because I think you've probably seen that original like mock-up of the duel between Boba Fett and Cad Bane.
Yeah.
I think that was supposed to be a season 6 arc that never got finished.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Um,
Because we have we
I
have
do
like
find that.
we have the unfinished animations for that. Um,
Yeah.
but of course that season was the one that got released straight to Netflix. It never aired on
Hmm.
Cartoon Network.
Yeah. And then obviously we recently have gotten season 7 of the Clone Wars, which aired straight to Disney Plus, or did
It was
that get
straight. It was
released on?
straight to Disney Plus on in 2020, I think, or 2021.
Yeah. So. Um, but yeah, uh, I really, I mean, I enjoyed listening to Dark Disciple and going through the book, but that would have been a pretty cool arc to see, because what we only get one other episode with what's his face,
And then Voss.
Str- Quinlan Voss, stripey guy. Anyways, and Saz Ventress, we don't get to see her a lot on this side of things, so it would have been cool to see her character kind of evolve to this point. I'm glad that they made it into a book, to keep it uh canon, but it would have been nice to see as a Clone Wars arc. Uh, well, Dave, I think that's about it for Clone Wars season 5. There is a lot that happens in this season. Like we said, these last two arcs have huge ramifications going forward. Um, a lot of stuff is happening. A lot of stuff is setting up things. But that all being said, they kind of had to make sure that they wrapped up as much as possible
Yeah,
because they didn't know, I mean, obviously pre-production's one thing. So these were released during a time in which, um, so these were already finished before all the acquisition
yeah.
and all that stuff happened. But
Or at
I'm
least,
sure that there were talks. I'm sure that there were talks. So they probably knew that they were having to start to wrap things up.
mhm. Well, I don't know if some of these later episodes would have been completely finished, but they probably would have been mostly finished at the time of all these airing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because I don't know I don't know how with the animation process, I don't know how much they actually go in and like how long they actually take with the animating things. I assume with the because I know some shows like the 2D animated shows, they
Mm.
would literally like it would literally be almost week to week.
But say I
Just
know I
the
heard like the reason like South Park can stay so up to date with like jokes and political stuff is because they usually go week to week on making episodes,
yeah,
especially since the animation style is a little bit simpler. This
yeah.
is a little more
But
complicated, probably takes a little longer, but
this probably takes like I said they were working on season 6 when this was airing.
yeah.
Season 6
So
was in production, and season 7, canceled season 7, was in pre-production at this point.
yeah,
So they're working on multiple seasons at a time. Um, or I guess the writers are. They're probably voicing multiple seasons, like kind of simultaneously, and the animators are probably working on multiple seasons simultaneously. Um, but with it being a 3D animated show, I don't know how long the animation takes for each episode because
yeah,
on one hand it's not quite like 2D animation where um like especially older 2D animation where they literally had to go through frame by frame and draw every single frame.
yeah,
Um Obviously like South Park is uh it's 2D animation but they use models. So,
yeah. Makes it a little
it's
easier.
yeah. So like they only have to draw the characters once, and then they can pose them in different ways and stuff.
Hmm.
And with different mouths and or facial features and stuff. But
Hmm.
so that's one reason why South Park is so quick. But with this, it's CG. It's a lot of CGI. So
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm. Yeah. So, either way, I do believe when they finalized what they were going to release for season 5, they were under the impression that they probably weren't going to have too many more seasons and wanted to make sure that things left on a end that would make sense. So, getting rid of Ahsoka, making sure that the Mandalorian arcs felt semi closed off. If Maul has just lost to Sidious, then nothing's gonna happen with that unless Sidious wants it to. So they kind of left things in a place that it seemed logical. Um, So, but all in all, I mean, if this ended up being the end, it was a very I think it would have been a pretty abrupt end. It's kind of one of those things where I would like to go back and do what we're doing currently for like the Bad Batch, because when we watch the Bad Batch week to week, we analyze episode by episode, whereas this we analyze the overarching season, and
Hmm.
sometimes it may need to be seen more as a season as opposed to being broken down episode to episode, you know?
Yeah. I think currently the plan is to talk about Rebels first.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we have that somewhere on the schedule around July or August.
Mhm.
Talking about Rebels. So maybe sometime next spring. Look forward to us talking about Bad Batch again.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
but
we did just go through episode by
yeah.
episode, pretty much the entire series. I don't. We may have not done season one completely. I think maybe we did season one as a whole. But I know we have talked about Bad Batch on the shit on the show. I'm just saying, like, I think I should go through at some point myself to get a better view of Bad Batch, because I do think a lot of it is because like we watched it week to week and analyzed it week to week. I see it a little bit differently than I would if I were to just watch it as a season in a whole, instead of having to wait, a whole entire week to get answers. You know, it might make a little bit more sense as opposed to kind of getting my hopes up for things that don't come to fruition in the next episodes.
Mhm.
But
Yeah. I
anyways,
mean, yeah. That is definitely something we should look into doing. I don't know. Once we get through Rebels, we might. I think Ahsoka was on the schedule too, because it kind of leads straight into that. So we might kind of circle back with some of the live action shows before we come back to Bad Batch, just because again we've talked about it like season three came out last spring, so we've talked about Bad Batch relatively recently. Um,
things like that, things like Andor we've talked about recently, but like,
yeah,
shows like Kenobi, um other shows like what else has come up? But some of the Mandalorian seasons, we could
yeah,
probably discuss those because we
yeah.
haven't done those more
Mandalorian, Book of
recently.
Boba Fett. Um,
Yeah.
we will circle back to at some point, and again, at some point, we will probably come back to stuff we have already talked about. Give it like a year or two. We might even be back talking about the Star Wars movies or the podcast, or I mean, or the Clone Wars again, just because our opinions might change over time, which is
Yeah.
kind of
I mean,
um,
and one thing I think we've talked about too is, obviously we do want to keep coming back to the movies because we're Star Wars fans. So why are because we watch the movies. So we want to watch the content. We want to analyze the content. I mean, hopefully when we do this, it won't be a beat for beat exactly what we just did. You know, coming to you again talking about A New Hope. We don't want it to sound exactly like it did when we talked about last time, but it's also a thing of that's what Star Wars is.
hmm. I think
We got to sit here and talk about these things.
one thing that we might be able to do where we can kind of cover a lot of this stuff, but maybe not necessarily be repeating the same things over and over again. I know this is something Wesley and I have talked about, and let us know in the comments if this is something you would like to hear us talk about. But instead of doing um, talking about individual shows or movies, talking about individual characters and going through all of their appearances and kind of their character arc. I know we've done that a little bit with some of the wiki episodes, but I'm talking about diving more into
A
it
lot
from the
deeper.
point of view of where we see them in like the movies. So, or like let's use
Mm.
Han as an example. Talking about Han's character arc, all we see him in, talking about Solo and uh his character arc through the original trilogy.
Well, I'll say this much is like, that's also a thing we can do. Also, to get a fresh take on the movies, I would love to go through the novelizations of the movies and get different
That would be a good idea. Yeah.
perspectives different perspectives on how the movies are seen. I've recently started listening to the Phantom Menace,
Mhm.
the audiobook for the novelization of Phantom Menace. It is completely different. I mean, it goes through obviously the same plot points, but like the way it's structured, because books are structured differently than movies are. So like it starts out
And
differently than the movie does. It goes
yeah,
through different things, gives you added details.
but one thing too that books do that movies can't is give you the internal monologue of characters. So you
Yes.
actually you like you can kind of tell what characters are thinking in movies, but in books it literally spells out what characters are thinking.
Exactly. Another thing that we've talked about too, and I would love to dive into this a little bit more, are comic books. Comic books
Mhm.
are a great source of media in Star Wars. There's a ton of Star Wars comic books. So there's a multitude of things that we can get into,
I
but
know, I know.
obviously we do want to stay true to the
Mm,
movies, which is what most Star Wars
yeah,
fans know.
yeah. I know you and I have talked about the Invasion comics and the Vader comics, but
Yes.
um, where those are going to be, we'll fit those in sometimes because I do want to talk about both those. I do want to read both those because I actually have not read either one of those
The
series.
biggest
But
thing is like we mentioned at the beginning is working full-time jobs, going to full school full time, which me and David both do. Having a social life of some kind, if we can get that in, family, different things along those lines, and still running a podcast is a lot of things. Sure, you can be like, hey, you know, you look at your subscriber count, look at your views, like you're not doing anything. It's like, well, no, but we're putting in the work nonetheless. Like, our metrics don't matter because I mean they do matter, but it doesn't matter to how much work we're putting into it.
mm,
And we are putting in the work behind the scenes that people don't see. Just because we put out a 2 hour video doesn't mean we sit down and record for just 2 hours. There's a lot more that goes into all of this. And to sit down and read a book, sit down and read a bunch of comics, sit down and even watching a movie is supposed to be a leisure activity, but me and David had to sit there and actually analyze it to bring something to the table. Obviously, I know we could do that in a better way. There's plenty of channels out there that do it better than we do it, and hopefully we're entertaining enough to be entertaining.
mm,
Because analytically, we're probably not the best. Uh, going through and diagnosing and analyzing the movies and stuff like that. But it still takes a lot of time and effort to do what we do, and there's a lot that we would love to do, but it's not always
mm. Well,
easiest to get done.
yeah. With that, I think we're probably close to a wrapping point here. So, you have any saving graces here?
I mean, I can lay a beat down if you want to start rapping, but I didn't think that's what we did. I don't think anyone wants to hear us freestyle.
Yeah, I don't think anyone does either. But
Two white guys from the South.
yeah, I don't think that's gonna work out too well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm good to go ahead and cut this off. It's been a long day, and I'm tired. So,
Yeah, it's 10:30, so yeah, it's
yep, yep. It's past your
yeah
bedtime.
for reference. I know I look like a zombie right now. I have been up since 4 a.m. It's 10:30 p.m. right now, so yeah, I'm tired. Anyway, um,
I'm usually just getting home from work, so this is where I'm good at.
yeah,
So, but I need to let David get to bed. So, with that, as long as David has no more final thoughts, which being a zombie, he probably does not. uh, thank you for joining us and listening to the podcast. If you made it all this way, leave a comment down below, and be sure to join us next week on X-Wing Radio. That was very short, sweet, but to the point. So. It's not next week. It's going to be bi-weekly.
now this is podcasting.
I hate you so much.